There was a Nightmare Creatures remake announced, right? I didn't just hallucinate that after too much screwball? Ah, okay, well, why don't we check on the progress of that? Oh, well, guess I can't say I'm too surprised to see it shelved. Honestly, I was even more surprised to see it announced at all. I know, we're in the age of constant remakes, HD ports, and reboots, but this is Nightmare Creatures we're talking about. A game whose last release was a mobile phone port of the first game back in 2003. I recall liking this game as a kid, but, well, I liked everything as a kid, so that's not really a good endorsement. Nightmare Creatures was a critical success, though, selling over 1 million copies, even with the rather middling review scores across its releases on PS1, Nintendo 64, and PC, even managing to get a sequel in 2000. But is Nightmare Creatures a game really worthy of getting a remake? Let's find out. Nightmare Creatures was developed by the now defunct French developer Callisto Entertainment, this game being their magnum opus over their 12-year run as a company. Nightmare Creatures is a 3D hack-and-slash game mixed with survival horror elements. Nightmare Creatures draws very heavily upon gothic horror for its setting. Setting I will say, it pulls off pretty well. The various locations of 19th century England are all dark, dreary, and sufficiently creepy as well. Combo that with the foreboding music tracks, especially the ones that use constant whispers of the damned that keep you on edge. And you have a game with a pretty solid atmosphere for a horror game. The story of Nightmare Creatures is as follows. A long-ass fucking time ago in a town called London, the Brotherhood of Hecate mixed the plague, rabies, and some other shit to create a virus that mutated animals and people into grotesque monsters. Monsters they planned to use to take over London, and then the world. And they would have gotten away with it too, if it wasn't for that meddling cult member Samuel Pepys, who, in a crisis of conscience, burnt down their lair, exterminating the cult and in the process causing the Great London Fire, a real-world blaze that engulfed most of London and killed over 6 people. Well, probably more, but it was mainly peasants who died. We don't care about the filthy underclass. Hundreds of years later, the sinister Adam Crowley is picking up where the Brotherhood of Hecate left off, letting the plague loose on the streets of 1800s London. Luckily, the diary of Samuel Pepys ends up in the possession of Father Ignatius Blackward, a renowned fighter of the occult and ass-kicking man of God. Seeing the horrible things written within, and knowing he won't be able to do it alone, Blackward calls on his boy, Dr. Jean Franciscus, a renowned American immunologist, to help combat the plague. Dr. J brings along his daughter, Nadia, Action Girl Supreme. Dr. J and his daughter travel to London where, unfortunately, Dr. J is murdered. While attending his funeral, though, a strange man approaches Blackward and Jean and passes them a note claiming he has information on the Brotherhood of Hecate and Adam Crowley. Blackward and Nadia follow up on the man's tips, and the game proper begins. You can choose to play as either Ignatius or Nadia. Both characters possess completely unique movesets from one another, what with Father Ignatius being a master of stick fighting, and Nadia being a champion fencer, as well as a gymnast, also known as the Perfect Woman. In addition to your melee movesets, both of these fearsome warriors have access to an array of items they can use to slaughter the armies of evil. These include anti-monster stink, flashbang grenades, dynamite, fire bombs, proximity mines, cryo grenades, and my personal favorite, gun!
Boom! Headshot!
Shoutouts to this game for making the gun amazing too. Point it, shoot it, basically it kills almost everything in one shot, as it should be. You'll be needing all of these implements as well. Turning back the tides of darkness is not an easy task whatsoever. The game starts and this is where basically everything falls apart entirely. Okay, I'm over-exaggerating for comedic effect, but Nightmare Creatures as an experience is definitely hobbled to an infuriating degree by the actual gameplay. I'll explain as I go through the game. You're dropping into the streets of London, your only real guidance being to go forward and kill whatever monsters Adam Crowley throws at you. You'll run across zombies, werewolves, demons, pee-pee monsters, dockers, not really sure where they got that name, but alright. Insects of no particular bug kingdom, the rarely spotted Thames monsters, harpies, flashers, spooters, giant rats, gargoyles, and hellhounds. have to say, I do like the creature designs in this game quite a bit. They're bony, disgusting, and monstrous, as your monsters should be. They do a good mix of standard monster fare, as well as having their own unique creatures as well. If only it was fun fighting them. Okay, so to cut straight to my main criticism of this game, combat kinda sucks. And it really kills the game entirely because of it. Perhaps it's because I'm not a god tier gamer, but as I got more and more into the game, the combat just became super frustrating, almost to the point where I didn't even want to play anymore. To try to explain a little more in depth, you have 4 basic buttons: weapon attack, kick, block, and jump, with a power attack available by pressing forward in conjunction with either attack. These buttons also form the combos that you learn throughout the game. I put learn in quotes because you're never actually gated off from any of your combos at any point. The only thing stopping you from doing any of your combinations is your own lack of knowledge. The game also doesn't keep track of your combos, so remember to jot them down or memorize them as they pop up, which is semi-advisable. I won't say doing the combos is useless. Some of them are actually quite useful, mainly for their gap closing ability, which is critical since every damn monster in this game hops around like a jackrabbit who snorted 6 lines of pure Colombian coke. Even the massive dockers move at that speed, it's insane. So you need to learn a combo that can gap close, which is easy since most of your attacks shoot you forward like you're sliding across an ice rink. And since the creatures are so mobile, these moves are a curse since you will just fly past them half the time. Oh, and this game has tank controls, so if you go gliding past your target, you can only slowly right yourself back to your target. What you say? Also, while this game has a quasi-lock-on function of sorts if you block near a monster, most of the time it won't track unless the target is right up in your grill. Fortunately, blocking stops all attacks from all angles, but good luck hoppling back into an offensive stance, especially later on when fighting multiple targets is a more common occurrence. Items help to counter group fights at least, but a majority of the time the most effective way to do battle is to just gap close and then just mash your basic weapon attack until your target is dead. You spam light attack since it'll keep your target in hit or block stun until they die, or when they finally decide to just say fuck you and blast through your attack. It is possible to simply just run past a lot of the enemies since you're not technically required to kill any of them, unless you're a completionist obviously, but this is also ill-advised because of the stupidest mechanic in this game, the adrenaline meter. Now, when I say adrenaline meter, what does that make you think of? Perhaps a bar that builds as you do battle and can be activated to increase your damage for a short time? Well, in Nightmare Creatures, it's a bar that drains constantly and can only be refilled with murder. What happens when it's empty? You just start dropping health, rapidly. I was unaware this game was the inspiration for Jason Statham's movie Crank. The bar drops fast too, almost the second you're out of combat, so you have to keep on top of your raging bloodlust. Hope you don't get lost in these dim, samey looking levels or miss a little lever that doesn't really stick out at all, because if you screw up at all, say goodbye to most of your life bar, and a continue potentially. This is such a stupid, unneeded mechanic that I fail to even see the purpose of it other than stressing you out, I guess. I later found out that the Nintendo 64 version gave you the option to disable the adrenaline meter, therefore making it the superior version. In spite of my gripes though, I plowed through the game on PS1, all 20 levels. There isn't much to say about the structure of the game's levels, just to get from point A to point B without dying, and only to catch that dastardly Adam Crowley. You chase him through a town, another town, and then into the sewers, because while Awful Game isn't complete without a sewer level, after the sewer you run into your first boss. It's the Sewer Hydra. It's a pretty simple battle made difficult by the game's controls. Collapse the roof on him, and move on to the sewer proper. There, in the Thames tunnels, I discover, to my utter horror, that this game expects me to do platforming. Platforming with bad controls is always a recipe for disaster, especially if you're jumpy like me. Nothing like overshooting your jump, landing on barely the edge of the platform, and then panic mashing back, which short hops you to your death. Fun. Can you sense how frustrated I am just even talking about it? All of this mounted by this level, and that wasn't even halfway through the game at that point. The biggest problem here is as the game drags on, it simply gets less fun. Enemies become more plentiful and are often of the more, bullshit varieties. Gargoyles, for example, are immune to all item effects. What you say? So now I'm just gonna blow through this game since my amusement is over. There really isn't much to talk about anyway. Chase Crowley through a cemetery, a heath, some docks, a city, another city, and then you fight the next boss, a Yeti, and holy hell, this is the worst level in the game by far. You battle the Yeti in a church, the objective being to blow up the explosive barrels and collapse the roof on top of them. Doesn't sound hard, but good god, it's almost impossible to do thanks to the controls. You're running on this circular plane with tank controls, desperately attempting to grab the dynamite to use on the explosive barrels. All the while, the Yeti hucks snowballs at you. If you get too close to the Yeti, ice drops on top of you as well, which, if you need that last piece of dynamite, it's pretty much a given they'll get dropped on you. The Yeti also attacks like this: normal snowball, insanely quick snowball, double snowballs, insanely quick snowball. Have fun getting clobbered constantly. I basically stopped even trying to dodge and just bonsai charged and hurled all my dynamite to win, because sometimes banging your head up against the wall is the best solution. Chase Crowley through the Regent's Canal and the London Zoo, which might I say is the most disappointing level in this whole game. A zoo with no unique creatures that might be at a zoo, like an elephant or a tiger or something. Well, at least Resident Evil Outbreak did that right. Chase Crowley through Marylebone, which hits you with a bizarrely difficult fight, which honestly felt like a boss battle, but it isn't. Though it does get a sick music track to go along with it. 3 giant gargoyles, an actually insane proposition for a fight since, well, like I said earlier, gargoyles are immune to items, so no shooting them, AoE shooting them, or blowing them up. Because being made of stone means you're immune to explosives, I guess. Your best bet is to just hit a berserker power-up and slash him to ribbons. Continue your chase of Crowley through Bloomsbury and Pimlico before hitting the next boss, Jose Manuel. Pretty sure this is just Spicy Jack the Ripper. Thankfully, this boss is much easier than the Yeti, in spite of basically being the same thing. The only obstacle is one zombie, an easily dispatched enemy, especially with your higher tier weapons that you've most likely acquired at this point. Conveniently, Manuel stands in the middle of an Iron Maiden, one which you have control over, for some reason. So, smack the levers, impale him, and move on to the endgame. The climax of this game takes place in Westminster. You battle through the building, chasing a wounded Crowley that Nadia shot when she could. A wounded Crowley is cornered on the rooftop, and in desperation, he takes the same monstrous potion he's given his followers, mutating him into an abomination. The game bids, "May God be with you," as you walk onto that rooftop. Here, the final battle begins. Crowley sends a swarm of fire-breathing imps, which will annihilate you if you're not careful. You slaughter them, and Crowley hops down to fight you himself. To beat Crowley, you have to pummel him with one of your 4 hitting combos only. Anything less than that, I think, just kind of bounces off him. You beat him into a Mortal Kombat dizzy state, and then...
Fatality.
Nadia and Father Ignatius escape the burning building, and Crowley is dead. Or is he? A mysterious figure is seen digging Crowley's severed head out of the rubble. The groundwork for a sequel is laid, and the credits roll. Yeah, this game's kinda meh, to be totally honest. I can see how this game has accrued its cult following over the years. It sets a good atmosphere, and has an interesting setting, but it's an experience that's bogged down by wonky controls, some terrible mechanics, and combat that gets a lot less fun as time goes on. There's potential here, potential that might have been brought out by the reboot. Could you guys imagine a New Age Nightmare Creatures with great graphics, horrifying monsters, and maybe with Dark Souls style controls? Yeah. Wait a minute. Regardless of my opinions, Nightmare Creatures was successful enough to warrant a sequel, Nightmare Creatures 2, released a couple of years later. I'll have to see if things improved there, but until next time, I'm Hades Manticore. Thanks so much for watching if you are. I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.